porpoise in that group, but know that wherever you see porpoise, it's a really great place to fish. So redfish are my favorite fish to fish for. If you catch one of mine that have a tag in it, we've already released in this area. We've already come through and done our releases here. We're up at Crystal River this weekend releasing. When you look at a redfish, where are their eyes and their mouth? On the bottom. Uh-oh, there we go. It's on the mouth is on the bottom, their eyes are looking down. The majority of the time, redfish are feeding on the bottom, and they're feeding on crustaceans, and they're feeding on those types of things. So one of my favorite things to do is to work soft plastics on a jig head. I usually work it on an 1/8 ounce or a 1/16 ounce jig head. And I'm not working it high in the water column if I'm looking for redfish. I'm letting it hit the bottom, and I'm working the bottom, and I'm letting it bounce off the bottom, or I'm letting it sit on the bottom and I'm dragging it. Depending on water temperature and what those fish are feeding on is how I work my bait. I so oftentimes get people on my boat that do the exact same way of retrieving their bait, no matter what species they're targeting. They cast out, they let it sink, and it's slow it down, and let's work it a little differently. You know, in potholes, if I'm working it, I'm watching to see where my bait is. I'll let it drop into the pothole, drag it across the bottom, pick my rod tip up. More oftentimes than not, that fish is going to hit on the fall of your bait. So a lot of times you're working a bait super fast, and you turn around to say something to somebody, and you let, it happens to me all the time. I'm working my bait, and I turn around, I've slowed my bait down and allowed it to start to fall, and boom, I get a strike and I've hooked up a fish. So those are some of the things that you want to remember is your call is when you're going to get a strike. Gold spoons, one of my favorite. Gold spoons I use often. Again, matching the hatch. I start out with a little small one like this, and then I move up in sizes, and I'll go all the way up to the 5/8 size. So 1/2 ounce is generally the one that I like to throw because it's really easy. And you can put trailers on them. You can put all kinds of different things on them. I've gone so far, and I've told you this little secret in the past. I go to the dollar store. You don't want to go to any of the other stores and get these. The fish oil capsules. The dollar store, the fish oil capsules are true fish oil capsules, and they have no other scent in them. If you get them from Target, if you get them from Walmart, if you get them from other areas, whatever the capsule is that's in them, sometimes will have a different scent, and the fish don't like them. I take a fish oil capsule, and you've got a little round capsule that looks like that. I take my hook, I pop a hole in the bottom of the capsule, and then I hook the capsule onto my bait, and I work it in that fashion. And now I have a scent trail forever on that bait. It's really great. I shared that technique with Southwest Florida Fishing Club, and the ladies later called me and said that they put them on their spoons and outfished the entire club in one of their tournaments because of it. So I was very proud that they did that. Remember, you said you don't have any shrimp in Tampa Bay, and where our shrimp is going downhill here. Here's one of my favorite baits to use. It's a DOA shrimp. Does anybody notice? Did I put it back? I did put it back. So when you look at this, I wonder whose truck that is. When you look at this, this is the way it comes rigged in your, when you buy it. But this is not the way that I use this shrimp. I take my hook out of my shrimp and I rehook it. I have to put my glasses on for this one. Sorry guys.
Welcome to the club.
So then I rehook it Now, look how my shrimp works. How does a shrimp swim?
Backwards.
Exactly. So now, when I'm using this shrimp, it is acting natural, and you can use it in this fashion. I tell you, changing the hook direction makes all the difference in the world, especially if you're going to free line shrimp. This bait has to be worked very, very slowly, and you got to have a lot of patience. I'm not a really super patient person. It's hard for me to work it, but in this fashion, when you've got snook that are not eating, when you've got redfish that are not eating, this bait on the surface, worked fast across the surface at night under lights, will tear. I shouldn't even use the word terrorize, but DOA is okay with that because that's one of their baits. It will terrorize a snook. There is a product out right now, it's called Procure. Procure comes in so many different flavors and scents. Their shrimp scent on this makes this bait probably one of the best baits that you can put in the water. So just remember this bait when you have redfish in a tournament where you can't, or you're just sitting on a group of fish and you see them there and they're not eating. You cast this bait out with a 20-pound fluorocarbon leader, 3.5 foot. They're moving and mulling around. Cast it out up current of them with a little bit of a Procure scent on it. They can't resist it. And you work it super slow, just barely moving it. It's like a drag. I drag it. And one of the things that I learned in tournaments, you can't do something called dead sticking, which is taking the rod, casting it out, and setting the rod, or just allowing it to sit like you're fishing dead bait. It's not, in most tournaments, it's not appropriate, or in the rules they say you're not allowed to do that. So what I do, you cast out, and I start to vibrate the rod tip. And I just wiggle the rod tip, and this little bait hops around and moves around, and then I drag it, and I wiggle the rod tip. And I try to make this bait look like what a shrimp would look like. And it works more oftentimes than not. So remember, switch your hook backwards when you get these, if you're going to use them. I've talked to Mark Nichols repeatedly and said, hey Mark, why do you work it in that fashion? Why do you do it in that fashion? He said, it's easier. It's easier for them to do it that way, to hook it up that way. And the way they have it weighted, it works better when it settles in that fashion to have it hooked the other way. I think it works equally as well the other way. So you can switch the hooks around whenever you want to.
What type of spoon do you have?
So this is a Johnson.
Yeah. Does anybody know the great thing about the 3 lures that she's talked about? The Johnson spoon.
Made in America?
Shrimp, made in Florida.
Made in Florida. They're all Florida brands.
All Florida brands.
Yep.
If you go back to 2015, if you Google Southshore Anglers, you go back to 2015 and you see Eric Bachnick. He starts with how to get so you can use a lure. And he starts with a DOA shrimp under a bobber, how to work that. And then he starts with, you talk about supreme confidence, you're talking about somebody else's product to start with. And then he says the Johnson spoon. And he said, there's all kinds of other shrimp and all kinds of other spoons, but they're made in Florida. And then he says, now we're going to talk about what I make.
And he makes an amazing product. He really, really does. He just doesn't, there are different products. I use this product all the time. I use it in all the different colors, and they've come out with better hooks and the Pro Eyes and all of the different product line. One of my favorite colors that he makes is bone. It's a bone color, and it has bones on it. It's absolutely awesome. So those are some of the products I use. I wanted to move into rods and reels that I use. One of my favorite and the only rod that I've been using, and he's here, Kelly, is bull bay rods. And you guys know bull bay rods, but I've been fishing with bull bay rods now. I used to be a Shimano Pro staffer, and I never fished with anything but their Terramar series. And I thought there is nothing that could compare until I started using their product. And their sniper with the poodle, I call I call it the poodle tail because that's what it looks like to me, is a poodle tail. But this, it does, doesn't it? Look at that.
Yep.
It looks like a poodle tail. What I love about this is just that it's equally weighted. I love the Florida Fishing Products only because it is a Florida company. However, they don't make the reel completely here. They get the products in and they put them together here. So they make the reels here, but I can tell you these guys make their rods here. The guides, the eyes, everything about it. This particular rod for casting, to me, casts farther than any other rod that I've had and is more accurate. A rod is very important in your accuracy. You may think that it's you, but it's not. If the eyes are not the right distance apart, if they're not the right size eye, and if these eyes down here are not the right size, your casting ability doesn't work. I wonder if that's my truck.
It's no one's here, by the way. No one's
It's
here.
not?
It's a wreck that's down the street.
Oh, okay. I'm going, is that my truck making that noise? So just know, and also if you take a look at the angle of the eyes also makes a huge difference in the castability of your product. So just, if you have an opportunity, take a look at, and I know that you can go and fish with someone and test their rods. I get rods sent to me weekly. Will you use my rod? See if you like it. Custom rod makers send me rods with my name on it, and they send me stuff, and I'm just like, I'm sorry that I've tried them. They just don't work for me like his. And the longevity, their guarantees on their rods. Something happens to them, they take good care of you. Customer service, and again, they're right here in Florida. So, and they're right here in your club. So does anybody have any questions for me?
When you fish the soft plastics and dragging them through all the grass and stuff, how are you fishing them weedless?
So that I fish with a jig head, or if I'm working a lot of grassy area, one of the things that I find with a jig head, if as you're bringing it through the grass, if you just give it a hard twitch, it takes the grass off of it so you can continue to work it in a weedless fashion. But Mr. Twister, Trocar, and I think he has another one here, Eagle Claw, all of them make the hooks with the weighted bellies with either the pin or the twisted keeper. Twist that into the end of your plastic, take your soft plastic, slide the soft plastic through so the hook comes out the top, just enough so that you can slide it back and take the end of the hook up underneath the plastic again, and that's weedless. My only concern, and the only reason I don't use those more, is they're not heavy enough. So they don't, I'm targeting redfish. So I want that bait to be on the bottom. And a lot of times that means, again, I have to be patient. I have to work that bait super slow in order to get it to the bottom. But I will, when I'm casting up under the mangroves, if I found a mangrove edge where I've seen redfish push up underneath the mangroves, I will switch out from a jig head to that type of a hook, which is, that you bury back into the soft plastic. I use those because I can actually skip those up under the mangroves. If it goes into the mangrove, again, just a slight little wiggle of your rod will settle it out of the mangroves and you can pull it out. One of the things that I tell everyone when you're getting into the mangroves, and I have clients and they cast into the mangroves, and then as soon as they hit the mangroves, they're ripping it, trying to rip it out. Whoa, whoa, don't do that. Finesse it. Allow it to settle, because if it flips over a limb and you go to pull it, it'll usually swing and wrap around several times and then you can't get it out of the mangrove. If you cast it in and you realize that's what's happening and you stop the cast, you can allow it to cast in and it'll swing, and a slow retrieve till you get about that much of the bait hanging below the branch, and just a quick flip and it will swing around the top, and instead of double flipping, it will flip right off. So I've worked really hard with my clients to get them to understand, and myself included, that as soon as I realize I'm going into the mangroves, I stop it, I don't jerk it out, and I usually can work my way out of a mangrove without ever having to go into that mangrove and get that. But a way to save yourself from actually having that happen is to change the way you fish your mangrove edge. So if I'm fishing a mangrove edge, and I may have shared this with you in the past, I'm looking for a mangrove shoreline that has hard land behind it. I don't want to fish a mangrove edge that has 4, 5, 6 foot of water up underneath it, because I can't reach the fish that are up underneath there feeding. But if it's only got an edge of 1.5 feet or 2, I can reach those fish, but the way that I reach those fish is I pull snug tight to the mangrove edge. If this is my mangrove edge here, I pull up close to the mangrove edge and I work down that edge, casting with the current coming at me, cast down and bring it along the edge under on that kind of shadow line, and the fish are laying up underneath there, and if it's flashing and working, they're going to see it and come out and eat. And instead of me working into a mangrove edge where I've only got a small zone, and then your bait comes out, now I may have crossed the noses of 2, 3, 4, 5 fish, so my catch ratio increases because of the fact that I'm working it in that fashion.
I started doing that just to avoid the limbs.
And getting tangled, yeah. The only thing you have to, now being a hunter, you have to take in consideration windage. So if the wind's blowing at the mangroves and blowing into the mangroves, you have to adjust the way you cast, because it can, what happens is you may not cast your bait into the mangroves, but the overflow of your line flows into your trees, and you don't want that to happen.
With a bull-bait sniper rod, you got to take in humidity, the rotation of the earth. I mean, these things cast forever.
Yes, that's
Really
exactly
got to
right.
calculate some.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Cast and text at the same time.
Yep.
Yes,
Put my feet up. Just got to pick around.
that'll be next. That'll be next. So, if
Jim, did you take notes on the edges of the mangroves and not casting into the? Never.
Squirrel fishing.
It only cost me 6 rods, right? Is that what you're saying?
So does anybody have any questions, or is there a topic or question that you want to ask that I haven't somewhat covered? Yes, sir.
I have to say, I'm just sitting there listening to you, and I've been to a lot of these seminars, and not discrediting anyone else. Very good job.
Oh, well, thank you.
I've learned more sitting here listening to you and some of the stuff that I'm doing that I need to improve on. Just like going down the shoreline. I fish that way, but I've never got close to the mangrove and fished down the shoreline. I'll throw down the shoreline and hope something comes up, but I've never gotten close enough.
I get up tight, right up tight, because you can cast in the little pockets, so you're casting and you get a shot at one fish. But pulling up close to the edge, and the same way you would work any type of structure. So if you have, so we're gonna fish trout and deep water, and you've got an edge, and you've got an edge that you've got 3 foot of water and a grass edge, and then it drops off to 6 foot of water. Everybody has a tendency to stay way out deep and to cast to the edge and fish it, so you're only fishing one narrow slot of that edge. I pull up, I use my hummingbird, I find out where my track is, where the deeper water is. I get into that deeper water, and now here's my edge going here. This is the boat, this is the edge. I'm casting up, current coming at me, I'm casting up, and I'm working that whole edge, because those fish are all hanging out there. But if you're fishing it from this direction, you're only getting a shot at 1 or 2 fish right here.
And you might be spooking them when it lands.
Exactly.
If it's cast down here and you spook that one, you still got 3, 4
You
others.
still got other fish that you can work. One of the things that I had shared too was if you're trolling motoring along and you blow out a bunch of fish, I mark it in my GPS because I'm gonna go down the shoreline, give it a half an hour. I'm gonna circle back around. I'm gonna come right back to that spot. One of the things in Tampa Bay that I love, and on your shoreline, South Shore, is that there's deep troughs, and then there's these beautiful grass flats, and there's areas that I was in this past December, tailing redfish all over the flats out there. I get out there and we're gonna weight it, and we've got these fish, and I'm casting to them, and I'm using a soft plastic that I hadn't really ever used before. I was in someone else's boat. I didn't take my gear. I was using their baits. I was using the type of hook that I mentioned to you, which is that because we were tailing fish, shallow grass and water, I used the same twister keeper into my soft plastic and then put the hook back through the back. I was missing my strikes all the time, and I couldn't figure out why. A lot of plastics, the density of your plastic can predicate your hook set. Because if that hook can't push through the plastic and expose enough of the hook to get into the fish's mouth, you can't get a good hook set. And I had fish eating my bait, doing the hook set, and not getting them hooked up, because the hook would not push all the way through that soft plastic to give you a good hook set.
We lost a tournament 2 weeks ago because of that. Very same thing happened.
It's a